Today on The Futurist Mom, we're talking about something every parent struggles with, which is how do you have the hard conversations with your kids, especially when they're pushing you away. This starts young, because when our kids hit the teenage years, the stakes get higher. And we need to talk about sex, failure, relationships, and money. But today's kids are also navigating threats that we never faced and mental health challenges that can spiral into deep crisis. And increasingly, they're turning to AI companions that may feel safer to confide in than us. Yet right when these conversations matter most, many of us retreat. We worry that we'll say the wrong thing or that our kids won't want to hear from us or push us away. Some parents turn to surveillance and monitoring, but that's not the answer, is it? Real connection is. Hi, I'm Nancy Giordano. I'm a strategist, global speaker, author, and mom of three, really focused on creating a safe and thriving future for all children and hopefully all people. And today our guest, Jen Shoemaker Davidson, is here to talk about this struggle intimately. Though she's not a clinician or a formally trained parenting expert, she's a mom who figured out how to stay connected to her teens, even when they wanted her the least. Her new book, Keep Talking, Conversations with Our Kids When They Want Us Least But Need Us Most, comes out right now, January 2026, and offers practical strategies born from real experience. Jen will share how to build the kind of trust and open communication that serves as the foundation for navigating everything else. The traditional tough topics, the new digital age challenges, and helping our kids process their hopes and fears for a future that looks nothing like the one we grew up expecting. Welcome to The Futurist Mom, Jen. Jen, I'm so excited that you have the time to talk about conversations that matter. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh my God, thank you so much for having me. This is a conversation I'm very excited to have.
Well, because you just wrote a book, which is super exciting. So first I'm going to say high five that. That is on
Thank
many
you.
people's, mental bucket list, and they don't always get it done. So the fact
Yes.
that it has gone from an idea to actually a book that is now, by the time this podcast comes out, will just be launching at the same time in January 2026. I'm going to say high five. Well done.
Thank you so much. Yes. Everybody's got a story. I was lucky to finally get mine on paper.
Well, lucky and I think, again, persistent to make it happen. But there's something, I think it's
Yes.
because you have when you have a real pull, there's something you really want to say. It makes it easier to do it. Your book is really easy to read. It's really, really friendly, but it's about a very, very important topic about how we
Yes.
have meaningful conversations with our kids, particularly as they get into teen years when they want to speak to us less. So talk to me about your journey to the book and like why you feel like it's important to have this out in the world now.
Yes. So I just realized when my kids are in high school, I had a lot of ideas that I wanted to make sure that I spoke with them about before I launched them, and worried, honestly, that they would be out in the world and clueless. And I'm type A. I had a bucket list of things that I needed to get out. And so I realized that having these conversations at home and when they're busy and distracted did not work. So I came up with an idea I called my life lesson lunches, and I would take each kid individually out to lunch, and I would have a topic, and I'd let them know ahead of time sometimes I didn't. And I said, you don't have to talk, but I'm going to, and I want you to listen. And this is what we're going to discuss today. And I basically went through my list, and I realized that these were all conversations they did not necessarily want to have at that time. But now that I'm past it, I'm reflecting back, and I'm here to say they valued it tremendously. And I was kind of onto something, and they asked me to write it down so they could do the same thing with their kids when they have their eventual families. And the book was born.
Wow, that's the biggest compliment ever, which is asking you to write it
Yes.
down. And the second, I would tied with the fact that your oldest child, Emma, wrote the foreword to your book,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
also a pretty
My favorite
extraordinary
part.
thing about, right? About how
Yes.
important it was that
Yes.
these, but I think it was probably, I'm assuming, more than just the life lesson lunches, that this is a pattern that had started very, very early on when your kids were young. Because I believe you can't
Yes.
just suddenly, I mean, it's better to start later than never, for sure. Like to your
Right.
point, I think you told me this off camera that it's never too late to have these kinds of meaningful and heart-to-heart conversations. But my theory has always been that you set that pattern for that when they're very young. And it makes it a
Yes.
lot easier to get into the really difficult conversations as they get older, right? To have built that
Right.
trust and to have built that openness.
Exactly. Like I say, it's a lot easier to ask the tougher questions when you start with the easy ones when they're little. And just even building the conversational like patterns with them. They understand that, don't say, how was your day? You know, one word answers are never going to get you into the conversations you want to have with your kids. Like open ended curiosity, that is the number one thing. If we're curious about really what's going on with our kids, it does flow. And that's, I think, the piece that people overthink.
How much do they care about what's going on in our life? Like when we
Probably
talk about
not a
what's going
lot.
on in our world.
I
So I always
honestly,
think it's like, go ahead.
I think they are so self-centered during these years that their world is themselves, their friends. And I talk about this in my book where I was at the mall with Emma and she ran into some people. We were new to the area, new to the school, and she's like, I can't be seen with you, and just left.
Ditched
And
you.
it and just ditched me. And I mean, I understood I was hurt at the time, but we do not matter in the sense that they're building their identity, they're pushing the boundaries, and that's important and developmentally very necessary. We just have to stay curious, keep asking, and understand where they are, and try not to take it so personally.
I think that trying not to take it too personally part is a really, really important part of this whole conversation around futurist mom, right? There's a lot of places that when we start thinking about the future or talking about some of these, again, more tender topics, it is easy to take them personally. And we've had another
Oh,
whole episode about how we need to do our own work internally right now. I talk a lot
yes.
about that in the professional world, but I think it applies obviously even more importantly at home that we know what our own sensitivities and triggers are. So when those things happen, we leave space for our children to have their own authentic experience and don't imprint our needs on them. That has been a literally 20 something year lesson for me with my own children to navigate. So when you get to these tricky
Exactly.
conversations, you give them the space. So is your book more focused on the teenage years or does it start younger? Like where should we
I
drop into
mean,
this conversation?
I honestly like with every family, they're different. My kids, the maturity levels of what they're exposed to, the kids that are staying home, two working parents are going to have a lot more lessons. They're going to have way more autonomy. They're going to learn a lot more early. And so then people who are being helicopter parented, and I don't say that in necessarily a bad way. It's just your parents are at home, they're meeting your needs, they're driving you around, they're taking care of all the things. And so it could be earlier for some. And again, like I said, read the book early and you'll know, oh, I can go back. That's happening now and then revisit. Because I think understanding kind of what it's going to look like, the path going forward is important. So you can make a plan. And again, the book starts with talk to yourself. You have to be ready to talk to your kids. You have to know how to be calm, listen intense, like there are so many tools that I did not I did not get right a lot. And so a lot of this is my lived experience, my failures, my mistakes in saying it took me a while to get there. I monologued a lot and my kids tuned me out, and I had to really take a look at myself and say I have to do something different, and it's not on them, it's on me.
Okay, so these life lesson lunches, how frequently did you have them?
Oh, I would say maybe once every few months. I mean, it was not something I was
Okay.
nailing, but I mean, I talked a lot. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, those were the big ones, right? Like mistakes and sex and, what are you passionate about and all the things, life skills. They were big ones that needed, specific attention. But I mean, I did this all along the way.
For me, the car ride, right, to and from long commutes to school was such an
Huge.
amazing time because you're not looking at each other. You're parallel, you're
That's
kind of stuck
key.
in the space, but you're not making eye contact or taking a walk. Again, when you're
Yep.
walking, it's a different experience than when you're standing right across from one another, and
Yes.
feeling like you're on the couch being interrogated by someone.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
so why do we think that, oh, I mean, again, your research and your experience in this around why this becomes such a tricky, it should be such a natural thing. You would think that as our children age, we want to impart our wisdom, they want to hear our wisdom. Like it should just be sort of a wonderful road to adulthood, but it's not. It is a moment where
Yeah.
we really check out. And I remember at one point going to some sort of, I think it was probably a parent teacher conference or a back to school night. And there was a real emphasis on once your child turns 10, don't duck out, like they need you more than ever past 10. And I thought, wow, that was such an interesting warning. That is that moment where we think that, okay, they're good. We can let them, rock on into fifth grade and middle school and they don't need us, was really eye-opening. So
Right.
what is your
Right.
experience there about why we are so challenged?
You know, I I feel like parents, when the kids start to push back, and I have this whole lap bar analogy that I talk about, when you get on a roller coaster and you put that harness down, the first thing we do is we push against it. And we're doing that not to see that it's going to fly open and off we go. We're doing it to make sure that we're safe, that we're secure and we're stable. And that really helped me think about it when my kids were constantly pushing on me and pushing back. And a lot of parents give up at that point. I mean, we feel rejected, we take it personally, and all of our fears, and oh my gosh, we're losing them. And I think we just are almost paralyzed into inaction because we don't know how to reach them. And then the longer, there's this visual that I remember having after I got married, and you start to finally have the real problems, and you have to have that conversation. Again, this can travel through all relationships, that if you're walking toward each other, right, you will always be able to find each other. If one person turns away and you're just chasing, you cannot do that. Like, I kept thinking to myself, I need to get in front of them. I need to continually get in front of them. And if we are afraid to have those conversations, we lose opportunities and time, and that's when they need us most. And I just encourage parents to lean in and don't give up, because we know our kids, and that's the thing. We know them, and they need us to know them. And that is a piece that really launches kids to have that trust and that security, and these conversations can help get you there.
You talk a lot about parents being worried that they're going to say the wrong thing. And I think that's a really interesting thing, because theoretically we do know our children, right? And hopefully we know ourselves well enough and we think we've got something important to say. But I think that it is fair to assume right now our children are feeling really, really fragile. I've done a lot of stuff in the TEDx world. We did a lot of stuff with TEDx youth. And so I spent a lot of time with teenagers, and we spent a lot of time talking about these kinds of things. And they're really, you see them over the course of time, in which I was working with this group of rotating teens, like every year to be a different group of students, how they became more and more, I don't want to say fragile, because I don't think they're fragile, but definitely sensitive and attuned to rejection, attuned to not feeling enough, attuned to feeling shame around whatever behavior may have happened online or not, or what's going on with their friends. Like, I do feel like they're becoming, somebody used to talk about them, either teacups or crispies, was an interesting
Yeah.
description that Wendy Mogul had for children many, many years ago. But they're either like burnt out and fried, or that they are so fragile because of whatever. You can talk to the whole set of reasons why.
Right.
And we're afraid to somehow push on that. Is that fair?
Yes. I mean, I think the unknown, and that's something that I think I'm excited to talk about, because even since I've written this book, so much has changed in conversations that now are incredibly relevant and probably would go higher up on the rankings of what to say first. But, our kids are getting so much information from their friends, from the internet, at a level we cannot even compete with. And to jump into like AI and them talking to ChatGPT or whatever, here's the thing. The difference between their parents and a chatbot, or any other, even a friend in some senses, they're not interrupting, they're validating. They are giving them what they want. They are saying what they want to hear, and we are telling them what they should be doing. We are correcting them, and they don't want to hear that. They think they're invincible still. They think they know it all, and they don't care what we have to say. They would rather have the path of least resistance.
That's interesting. We were talking a lot about AI. I'm really focused right now on AI companions. So partly chatbots, partly at some point it's going to be their doll that's going to be able to talk back to them in a very near future, right? We talk a lot about already that I can build an AI companion that's like my favorite character from Fortnite or from something else, and have this like whole relationship with them. So there's a lot that's going on that, again, parents aren't playing with this, don't even know, to your point, that it's happening
Right.
online. And there's a lot of, pros and significant cons, and a lot of oversight that needs to happen in that place that is not happening right now. But I think what's interesting about it is that as our children, like, so I was having a conversation with someone today about, would I build an AI chatbot of myself for other work that I'm doing. Like I wrote a book too, and would I create a chat bot so people could ask questions about leadering and they'd be able to get an answer. So all of a sudden, as you were talking just now, I'm like, oh my God, what if we created our own like parenting chat bot? And our child could go to, Jen GPT and, Mom GPT, as opposed to going to Chat GPT. So they could have sort of the same openness around these conversations and questions and get our values and get our perspectives and get our stuff. So it's not randomly being supported by anybody on the internet, but it would be done in a more private and anonymous way. That is not
Right, right,
a crazy thought to imagine that that would be
right.
something that would happen in some near future.
Easily, I would say. And the part that just I would be so resistant to that, and the thing that I will scream from the rooftops is the piece that I think is missing so much is it's almost like parallel play. Families are sitting at dinner, but nobody's really interacting. You could have four people sitting on a couch and everybody's on their device, or one person's watching TV and the other person's doing something. We are not connecting as much as we used to. And I think one of the best ways that I found to reach my kids is through storytelling. And that is a way, because when I was struggling, I thought, how do I connect with all my friends? I've always been told, oh, Jen, you're a great storyteller. I'm very animated. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to start doing that and telling them about my past, my future, what I think, and engaging with them through stories, because those, if we don't pass those down to our kids, they will be lost. And that is the way history has been told. And so it's kind of going back to basics in a way within your own family to sort of spark the conversation by going back to telling stories and asking them, eliciting that from them, saying, tell me, whatever it is, tell me what happened today at school with a friend, or did something surprise you, or do you have any teachers that you love? I mean, start the conversation and let them talk and then stop talking.
Yes, I think that what I'm hearing from that is you start with your story to be able to open up the
Right,
gate, and then you pull out and let them do their
right,
thing when they
right.
start to feel excited and
Because
inspired to share their own
vulnerability,
story.
yes, vulnerability brings connection. And I mean, I share a lot about my life with people. I'm an open book. And I've always sort of wondered, you know, other people don't do that. And for a variety of reasons, of course. But I also have been told that people feel very close to me in that sense, because once you tell somebody something about your life, it opens an opportunity for them to share a similar experience. And when we can find alignment in something that we've both been through, or that we're struggling with, or something funny that happened, or a place we lived, it starts to build all of these different connections. And that's what we can do with our kids as well.
Yeah, and I think that there are lessons that we did learn growing up. I was a kid who grew up in the 70s, 80s, and plenty of drugs were around. Was in communities where I grew up, in apartments where I grew up, where there were plenty of people who were doing that stuff, and I didn't. I resisted for lots of different reasons. I'm not like, I was a pretty good goody two shoes, but because I'd grown up with so much crazy and I didn't want to be patterned into that as well, but I had my own
Right,
reasons for doing it. But I think even to give your kids the strength to know that you don't have to do it the same way that everybody else is doing it, right? That I did
right,
buck the system in this way or that way. Or if I didn't, the thing that I learned by having made that mistake and really wish that I hadn't done it that way, or gave myself a little bit of grace to go bump into that wall and it was okay and I survived it and it wasn't that big a deal, as an
right,
interesting thing
right,
I do think they are more curious about our experience and our upbringing than we give them credit for. That's why I asked at the beginning about how much they want to hear about our stories. They probably don't want to hear about my
right,
day, but they do want to hear about
right.
what I was
Oh, they
like when
want to
I
hear,
was
yeah,
12 or 17. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, for
Yeah, I think
sure.
that
I
that
mean,
telling it's
yeah. Yeah, I do believe that
no,
they
go
are
ahead.
curious. Life is so different for them too. I had the conversation about Mothers Against Drunk Drivers and how I had the contract with my parents that if I was ever somewhere, I would call them, no questions asked. They would not yell at me, berate me, all the things. And my kids kind of looked at me like, why would you ever need that with rideshare? And how lucky they are that those opportunities exist. I mean, of course, we probably had cabs, but we would still need a phone. We'd have to go to a pay phone to try to call a cab. Like
Yeah,
we
yeah,
just had
no,
a
totally
different
different.
world. And, it's interesting for them to hear what our life was like and how parts are relevant and some aren't. But the reality is, in that same vein, if you're ever in a situation for whatever reason, you're being bullied, you're in a party you want to get out of, like still the same thing. I'm a safe place, right? we want our kids to know that they can trust to come to us when things go wrong, because if they come to us sooner than later, we can help soften the blow, and sometimes we can't, but it gives them an opportunity to turn toward us, and that trust has to be built.
I'm not going to shame or call out, not even shame, I think that's an awful word, call out any of your children, but was there ever a moment where you did get called into doing something that was, that upset you when it happened, but you're really grateful that they called you anyway? Because I can say that that definitely has happened
Oh,
to me. And it was
oh, for
really like
sure.
contain, contain, contain the, wanting to like lecture right now,
Yeah. Well,
emotion.
and again, I had a situation that peer pressure for, one of my kids was, they knew better, and they were being told it's fine, it's not a big deal. And your kids have that sort of like centered feeling of knowing, uh-oh, that. And then when they came home, I could tell something was up, and it took them a little while to finally say, I did something that I think I shouldn't have done. And it took a while though. Like I could tell, but again, you give them the opportunity and say, hey, how did everything go? And I was beside myself that after everything I have taught them, that they would make a decision like that. And it, it took a lot for me not to be like, well, and I did. I mean, let's be clear. I definitely was like, what are you telling me right now? Like, I think I lost it for a minute, which I shouldn't have done, but then I kind of had to get into the mode of like, all right, let's talk this through and let's figure out how we can unring this bell. And it turned out okay. It could have gone differently, but it definitely needed some intervention. And it's a lesson that we still to this day discuss,
Right. And well, and
because
I think that, yeah,
yeah,
well, I was just going to jump in and
it's,
say, I think that it's also key to say that it's not only that we're only just like, compassionately listening. I do think there are moments that we actively intervene in moments where our
it's,
children need, needs help in some way or need some guidance. I mean, definitely had, a couple of altercations in the old high school level that like required some
oh,
significant like course correcting on some stuff.
yeah,
And so I think it is again that balance between like helping your kid through a really, really challenging time and knowing that they're still very loved and that they have, nothing
right.
to feel ashamed of, but that there's something that they probably learned here in this moment in time about, having and taking that and making that choice that I think is really, really key. But there's another
Yeah.
thing that I want to talk about. If you want to finish that thought, or shall I
No,
jump
I'm
into
good.
the
I'm good.
next?
Yeah.
Well, because I think that part of it was that you talk about in the beginning of your book, and I had the same experience that we were pretty free range kids. We got to run around and do stuff all day long. No one knew. I tell my daughter again that I was 10 and I rode my bike to the mall and then rode back along the
Yep.
roadway, probably without a helmet. And no one knew what we were doing all day long. And somehow we survived. I think that because parents have so many more ways to track their children and or prevent them from going off and doing those things. Right? They often don't give their children
Right.
that much freedom for lots of different
Hmm.
perceived fears and reasons. And or you can see on a map where your child is, or you can see if they spent money at a certain store. You can see if they snuck out for lunch because you can see if they went to Whataburger on their app. Do you
Right.
think that that then makes parents feel like they've got enough of a sense of what's going on for their children, they don't need to have those conversations? Or do you think like, well, like how
Yeah.
is that playing into, I think, modern parenting right now?
I mean, I think a map can tell us where they are, but we have no idea who they're with and what they're doing. And so I think those conversations are still so important. And also being curious about their life, what they're doing, who they're spending time with. And when they come back, it doesn't have to be, where were you? What'd you do? Da da da. It can be, tell me about who you were with. What'd you guys talk about?
Right.
Get curious about their world, because this is the piece too that I think is so stressful. We don't want to impose. We don't want to like, we want to honor some privacy. And I understand all of that. But even just little things like is opening the door for them to come in and say, actually, my friend has been struggling and they were telling us. And, these little micro moments of opportunity for them to share because they're processing. Maybe somebody came to them for help and they are looking to bounce ideas off of us. And so if they just come home and that's it, oh, did you have a nice time? Yes. And that's the end of it. It doesn't have to be, what were you doing? It can be, what'd you guys do? It's all in how we sort of frame it. If we stay
Right.
curious,
Yeah.
they will share pieces. Not a lot, maybe, but little bits. They'll know we care enough and that we're there. We don't want to talk about it, fine. If you feel like it, I'm going to be over here. It's
I mean,
it's
I do
just
think they
giving
are caring.
opportunity.
they are carrying a ton. And I do remember, again, with one of my sons, I think that because he is, again, this really sensitive and really caring kid, that he ended up holding a lot of stuff that was going on for his peers, was going on for his friends,
Yes,
and trying to figure out how he was going to help, them navigate, or, I think a key part of this conversation I certainly was had with my children is like, you don't need to hold this all for yourself. You don't need to tell me about it, but at some point you need to know when to escalate this, that this is beyond your ability to be able to help your friend through whatever is going on. Because I was really worried that at this point before ChatGPT, that kids were certainly turning to their peers, they were turning to their friends with really sensitive stuff and really important and really sometimes dangerous stuff. And they were not trained counselors. At one point, I wanted to start a whole program that was like peer-to-peer counseling tips for kids to know, like, how to say things to your friends, how to, put boundaries in place around certain things, how to know when to escalate stuff. Because I think it's really overwhelming for them to be
for sure.
sometimes in these friendship groups or in these circles or in these moments with people that they really care about and know what to do. And so I think, again, this portal then to be able to go talk to a parent or talk to a teacher or just know that there are adults in your world that you can trust with this information, I think is so important, even if it's said theoretically, that they know that
Right,
that's the way that we get that their world is challenging and that sometimes
right.
it's going to be overwhelming.
Yes. I
Right.
had a situation with my son when he was in middle school with bullying. And he had been bullied himself, and we had gone through all the different tools. But he witnessed a friend of his, I mean, really egregious comments being made. And he made the decision to go to the counselor and tell. And she called me to say, I want you to be very clear that if he continues this path, there could be retaliation, and that was a very real situation. And so I think
Just give me
we learned
chills.
a lot from that. We learned a lot from that situation, and moving forward, they have to balance the trust of their friends and the trust. And he went to this person, and his friend was like, don't do it, it'll get worse. And he was so afraid, and Luke was like, this has to be said, and ultimately said, for your protection, I'm doing this. And he went through with it. And it was one of those I was a very proud moment, but I mean, truthfully, very scared. And he ended up actually leaving that school, truth be told, because he just was like, it's not a fit for me. And we had just moved into the area. But it was a moment where even the counselor was like, just so we're clear, because we know when we break trust or we've got to have that conversation with somebody else to say, I think that you should tell somebody higher. And as they get into the teenage years, it's harder and harder. I was in a situation where I was looking at getting into a car with somebody who was drinking and talking to people with me saying, we should call my mom. I have this arrangement. And they're like, no way. We can't do that because your mom could tell our parents, and that peer pressure is very real. It is very real and
Right.
very strong. And navigating that is very tricky.
So as I'm actually really curious too between daughter and son. So I have, two boys and then a girl, which has made it actually a lot easier to not gender things because my two boys are so different. It'd be easy to be
Yeah.
like, well, boys are like this and girls are like that. But again, my two boys are so different that I think it has much more to do with the child. But I'm assuming that, what worked for one didn't work with the other because I think that
Oh,
that's often the case.
no, yeah. Not even close. Not even close. Very different, regardless of gender. And girls, they just being a girl in adolescence is just an entirely different world. And the FOMO and the worry and the being left out and everything that goes along with that is, boys, it's just not that deep. And I'm generalizing here, but for a lot of times, like, you just look and they would, things that just would never cross their mind. And I think sometimes I wish that girls could have a little bit more of that oversimplification, but no, very different through the way that I had to parent them, but also bringing them into each other's conversations. I used to do that a lot. Something would happen with Emma and I would say, just a second, Luke, come on in here. I think you need to hear this. And he would just be beside himself. And I would say, now this has happened to her. And just so you can file that away. Because I think all the bits of information that they can learn from each other's lessons and what happens in their lives just adds to that file cabinet if something were to happen to them or a friend.
Interesting. I don't know that I did that as much. That's a, so the most tricky thing about this podcast is learning things that I wish I'd done differently along the way. I'm
Yeah.
like, wow. I'm like, darn, I wish I had known that neuro hack, or I wish I'd thought about that
Yeah.
particular thing. And I think, again, as we were talking earlier, I think before we'd gone on camera, when I was a young parent, I was in a parenting group, and I made time every week to be with a bunch of other young mothers learning about what it meant to start to raise, infants and toddlers. Once you get to a certain age, you don't have that anymore. And if you're
No.
fortunate enough to have a neighborhood group, or maybe some sort of online group in which you get to exchange some of these things, but I think many, many parents are just trying to get through the day, right? And are
Right.
just trying to get through, like, so much is changing in their own world and their own work and their own economy, that to be able to lean into these kinds of conversations with your peers is really tricky to go do. And
Right.
so I think that sometimes we are on this island. And so I think the reason, again, that I wanted to have you here and to talk about this, because the conversations are going to get more intense. You and I had, a shared, you know, whatever, a conversation online on LinkedIn about a post that was really heartbreaking about a boy who had been shamed online through some sort of sexploitation thing. And in a very
Yes.
short period of time, within like 2.5 hours, he went from having what he thought was a romantic engagement with someone online who was curious about him and interested in him, to being called out, to being shamed, to then taking his life at the end, which was just
Yes.
absolutely crushed,
Devastating.
right? And I
Yeah.
see this story happening more and more. I hear the story happening with kids who have, extended themselves in some sort of, meme stock play, or in some sort of gambling online experience, or certainly, that are happening across the world, from all kinds of ways in which we're trying to exploit our children, into even Roblox, or into communities that we think are safe and are not,
Right.
in any way super protected for having our children be exploited by this. So I think that, again, how we start having these conversations with our children and letting them know that things that they may think that we just do not understand, we can't possibly imagine what's happening in their online world, or that
Right.
they feel really, really, really stupid that they made themselves so vulnerable to go do, and they don't know where
Yes.
to go turn, right? So I think
Right.
that's why this is critically important now, maybe in a way that was different than we were talking to our kids about condoms or not back in the day.
Right. Right. And I do think that we have we have big pockets of just missing information of what their life is like online. And we can't necessarily control what they're exposed to, but we can try to control how we react to it, and create environments that, if something were to go sideways, that they would feel comfortable coming to us and divulging something, whether it'd be, oh, I got stuck in this gambling situation, or somebody sent me a picture and I sent it to a friend, and now, by the way, that's distribution of child pornography. Like, there there are quick minutes where their decision, they're not equipped, and they do it, and then they just feel sick about it, and if they don't feel like they have someone to turn to, that's a very scary place to be. And I think
Well,
that's what we saw in that article that was
on that
circulating.
post, right? But also that I think recognizing, that having conversations with our children about the fact that you were manipulated by someone.
Yes.
Someone did this to you. It's not because you were weak, or because you were
Right.
stupid, or because you whatever, whatever. Like, this, someone preyed on you very intentionally, often. Maybe sometimes it's, more of a one student doing to another, but increasingly we're seeing that it's not just students that are doing this to one another, right? It is outside
Right.
entities that are doing it for exploitation reasons. And for kids to realize, just the same way that we taught them about, like, I taught them about, nutrition, I taught them about digital literacy and digital hygiene, and the fact that these whatever algorithms are out to exploit you, trying to get your attention, trying to do whatever. The same thing now that is happening here in this space. And so I think that's part of the reason I wanted to do this podcast in general, is to have parents be aware of all the things that are shifting and changing around this, and package in a way that's a little faster to get to than to go and have all the conversations you and I are having with people online.
Right.
But to recognize how intense this environment is for them, and that, again, they're preying on shame. That's the thing that makes this whole mechanism work for exploiters,
Yes.
and silence. Right. And so
Yes.
if we can make space, like, I even when, and the statistics are grim, one out of, I think, 4 children are going to experience something pretty horrific in one way or
Yes.
another. And so when my daughter went to university, I did sit down and have a conversation with her and say, listen, I'm sure this is not going to happen to you, but the statistics are pretty grim. Even if, God forbid, you were raped, right, by someone you knew or someone you didn't know, it will not break you.
Right.
This is not something that's going to take you down. This is not something that's going to be something that you have to live with in the dark. This is not something that you can't, we will work through this together. We will get through this. This is something that unfortunately in our society is happening in a way that we can't control it as much as we should. But baby, it will not take you down.
Right.
And I think just by
Right.
just naming what the worst thing is that could happen and just like at least saying, if that happens, we're in it together, gave her
Right.
some sense of relief around it. Like I wasn't Pollyanna that it couldn't happen, you know?
Right. I mean, because you hear it. You hear it through friends, you see it online. And again, one of the things that I did quite frequently and would encourage other parents to do is when you read those articles, sit down and say, did you hear about this? Talk about it and then tell them the situation and then ask. Stop talking and ask, what would you do in this situation? Like, tell me how you would have handled this, like just how you feel right now and start those conversations and then reinforcing by saying, we are always on your side. We are always here. There is nothing you can do that will ever make me stop loving you and wanting to protect you. So just reminding them and having those hypothetical conversations where they can actually stop and try to imagine a scenario, because I do think that helps them step into the situation and really think about it. And maybe the conversation doesn't go that deep, then they will think about it and say, look, if you want to come back and you have any more questions or talk about this again, let's do it, because this is really scary. And letting our kids know this isn't fear. And that's one of the things that I did wrong. I was a catastrophizer. And I mean, my kids joke about it. And I don't want it. I wasn't trying to be a negative scanner, but I grew up in a world where we didn't have all of these risks. And we have so much information and things seem scarier, but maybe they're not. They're equally, and we just didn't read about it because you had to pick up a newspaper. And so I want them to understand the dangers of the world without putting my fears on them, but also let them know that it scares me and that I'm here if something goes wrong. So just
Yeah, I
please
think that
utilize me.
you talk about, I think in the book, and I think that there's a really fine line, right, between making them aware of things and not becoming a fear monger around it.
Right,
And I think that,
right,
but I think again, part of it is being honest about your own fears. I'm afraid of this because, right? I'm
right,
afraid of this because are you afraid of this for the same reason? Like, and it's interesting to see that they may not be, that, their ability to call out even like AI slop so fast compared to what we
yeah,
are able to go see. I had
yeah,
actually my neighbors over for a holiday toast a couple of nights ago, and they brought their young son, who I think is like maybe 10, and we had like a Christmas scene up on the computer. It's like, oh, look at that AI generated blah blah blah. I'm like, how do you know that's AI generated? And he could easily point out to me the 7 things that were inconsistent with that photo and know immediately that that was not real. I'm like, oh my God, you're so good at that. And
yeah.
so I do think sometimes giving them more credit than
Oh, for
we
sure.
often do about their savviness, about their ability to read a space or a room, a community, a situation, and what that that they've got a path out of it if it gets crazy. But I
Right,
think even being able to just articulate that and have them recognize that they are better prepared than we may think that
right,
they are in a moment like that makes us all feel really, really good, right?
right. And that goes back to just letting our kids fail. I mean, this is one of the things that I think that's talked about a lot. Sometimes when we have opportunities to step back, we can literally watch our kids step up. Like that is the tool that is going to carry them through life. And we can't constantly sweep in and save them from everything. And it's hard to do in the time. It's very hard, especially if there's something you can do to intervene to stop the pain. It's hard to watch our kids suffer and have those moments, but it is so crucial. And if we can let them fail in a contained environment early, then that helps build the skill sets for when they get older.
Well, I think there's 2 things. One, I remember one of my old bosses, that when my children were really young, was like, little children, little problems, big children, big problems. And I like carried that narrative forever. And I've warned some other people around it because, yeah, it's easy to say that when they're in 3rd grade. It's a lot harder to do that when they're,
Oh,
whatever, junior in high school or heading into college. Like those become much, much scarier and bigger things. And again, I think the stakes are higher. There was a kid who, decided to go streak at one of our high school football games when my kids were young and ended up being booked on a sex crime because he happened to
yep,
flash a 12-year-old, that was sitting on the end zone. And so the risks are different. This is the other thing I try and teach my children is that, things
right,
we got away with back in the day, you don't get away with now. People put a lot more scrutiny on things that footprint's going to stay with you forever, right? When you put it
Forever.
online or you say it some
Yeah.
way. So really try to teach them a bit how the world works. So even in that, there are things they can teach us, and I think there are things that we can teach them. And
Right.
this goes back to,
Right.
again, why the conversations are so important, and to have them bilaterally, right? To have
Right.
them in both ways as we move forward. So one last conversation I sort of want to open up before we finish up, which is conversations about the future. You and I have both confided again offline that we have these sensitive children that are thinking a lot about, how the world is unfolding, either from an environmental standpoint or from a political standpoint or technological standpoint, right? There are a lot of questions that they carry, and often a lot of fears that they carry
Right.
about what this world is sort of presenting to them right now and what it's going to look like in the near or far future. And I think that's also a really, really important conversation to have, and to have thoughtfully and
Yes.
kindly
Yes.
with them.
And I think in the conversation we were speaking about earlier is one of the things that I try to tell myself, because this is still new for me too, is sort of normalizing the unknown without diminishing the emotion they're feeling around it. And if, you know, it's really easy to say, "Oh, we don't know," because we don't know. So we don't even know what to say to them. So, and we're having those same fears, but to literally sit in that with them and say, "This, you're right. This is super scary and I don't know," but then reframe to hope. And this is one of those things that, I mean, when you've got a kid that's a feeler, you don't want them to think it's not worth trying. You got to keep trying. That's what hope is. This is what I tried to explain is, yes, it's dark and there are some things that we I can't touch, we can't affect. But what can we do? Like in our world right now? Let's focus on that, because I think, and it seems overwhelming at times and it seems like we're not going to make a difference, but if we can just give them a sense of agency to make a decision to move a certain way toward hope, then we can try to keep those communication lines open. That's what I will be trying to do through
Yeah,
all of these new changes coming toward us at rapid speed.
rapid change. And I think, again, part of my whole, ethos in our family has been change is coming, and it's going to be great, because in many ways it obliterates so many of the systems and so many of the constructs that were not very fairly constructed to begin with, right? They came with a lot of bias. They came with a lot of history that was really painful. There's a lot of things that we can shift and change. I mean, you can sit here and even talk about the future of work and jobs. I feel pretty strongly that sitting in an office from 7:30 a.m. to 7 p.m., 5 days a week, 6 days a week, doing whatever it is you're doing on your computer is not the way that humanity was designed to thrive in the
Correct.
real world. So what an amazing opportunity if we got a chance to like really shift and change the future of working and really think about the future of work differently. And so I do then pivot to my, again, like I say, my natural, not just optimism or hopeful, but like, no, this is an amazing opportunity. Like, what would you want that really to look like? Like, okay, if this is happening, like, what does that mean it's possible over here? That's easier to do with economic stuff, with to some extent political stuff, even though that's really scary right now, particularly if you're a young person looking at what's happening in the US and how we're being perceived around the world. It's crazy. And you start to see the uprising actually around the world. Like more and more countries, what you're seeing is the youth quake uprising in many
Yeah.
countries where they feel like it is unfair, or the economic opportunity isn't what that was promised, or they feel like the government is corrupt and not taking care of them. And so it's an interesting experience and right now to also hold that responsibility that they may increasingly feel to try and change systems that they think are
Right.
unjust, right? And where is our responsibility or not in that? I mean, again, these are intense and big conversations. And as people have heard me say, if they've listened to all of the episodes so far, that I didn't always get that right, because I jump in and want to swoop in with hope,
Right.
and I want to open with like possibility and with pathways and with new framing and with new whatever. And they just wanted that moment to feel that sense of like,
Right.
they want me to tune into how scary the feeling really is,
Yeah.
and I think that part of what your book does a lot is helping kids build that sense of grit and agency, and that sense of
Right.
trusting oneself throughout their childhood and into young adulthood, that I think that we remind them of in these moments. And it still can feel really overwhelming, right? Your child is really worried about the
Right.
environment, and I'm really worried that we're going to an authoritarian rule,
Right. I
and
mean,
both
all
of them
feelings are
have good evidence.
yes. Yes, and all feelings are valid. And again, this is just one of those things, as a family unit, not every family is a safe place to say how you feel, or, having those feelings validated and say, we can have differing ideas and we can discuss this. And it's scary, but like, what do you think about it? And start the questions and find out where they're coming from, what their viewpoints are, and, and let it go. We just had a conversation last night and both my kids are home, and it was, I mean, it ran the gamut. We talked politics, we talked like history, I mean, all of it. And listening to them, my husband and I kind of just looked and just let the kids just watch themselves and learn from each other of their viewpoints, because they haven't been in the same house for a long time. And what a great gift that was for them to be able to share their views with each other in a safe place. And they both learned something, I can tell you that.
Right. And so I think this is a perfect way to round out the conversation now, because you end your book by inviting us to not just think about this inside our own little families, but to recognize that we're part of bigger communities, right? And to be in conversation with each other. As part of why I had my neighbors over the other night. And actually, I was really proud that my 25-year-old, who's been spending a lot of time with his girlfriend who's leaving the country for an opportunity for a few months, made the effort to come back and hang with the neighbors, which I was really, really proud of,
That's great.
because he enjoyed it and he felt like it was important to get to know, I mean, we've known our people on our street for a zillion years, but we haven't hung out and we haven't had a
Right.
toast. And one of the neighbors had passed away in the last year, and we wanted to honor her because she was a big Christmas person. And it was just it was just a sense of ritual. It was just a sense of
Right.
connecting. It was just a sense of tuning in about what's going on with each other, with everybody. And so I think having conversation, period, with people broader and outside of our
Yes.
unit is important. And the more diverse those
Yeah.
conversations can be, certainly the better, for the same reasons
Right.
that, your son and daughter learned something from each other yesterday. But what are you doing now that your children are grown, and who are you sharing all this wisdom with these days, Missy?
I know. So, I mean, in a perfect world, when you write a book, you have to come up with your why, and they drill this into you. And I have thought the writing the book is just the book. I mean, I hope it helps as many people as possible start the conversation and feel empowered to do so. But the piece that I miss so much is getting in the community. I mean, you talk about you had a mom's group. I did too, but what through basically like 3 months of age, and people go their separate ways. The connection, it takes a village. Like, I want to get out in communities. Let's get together a group of people, start a conversation about the book, and then let them continue on in that community, and build little pockets for people, because the isolation is intense right now and everybody's online, and you can be part of a Facebook group or all of these different things, but you're still, you turn that off and you feel alone, or you see what everybody else is doing and you feel alone. And people need to touch grass. Let's get outside and let's build our communities where we can, real people communities, because soon enough we're going to be sharing the space with, like you say, who knows, humanoids, or people be roaming around. I mean, I couldn't even venture a guess how soon that's coming, but we need to connect now more than ever. That's what I would
Yeah,
love to
and I
do.
think making that a priority, like really
Yes,
making that a priority. I think that all of us have the ability to go do that, but we don't prioritize it. And I think that
correct.
making that really intentional effort to go do that is a really, really key inoculation to so much of this other stuff that we're feeling, and
Yes.
helps our children recognize how important that is too in
Yep.
their own lives, to prioritize that. And I think, again, I will gender it a bit and say for boys, as even more so than girls, because I think for girls sometimes it's a natural inclination. One of my boys is super social, the other one a little less so, but I see with my partner, like, he has not prioritized that in his own life, right? And now you see him as
Yeah.
a man without a bunch of friends and a bunch of people to talk about these various life stages with. And I think we all need each other in pretty significant ways,
Yes.
and need to have space to be able to have the vulnerable, sometimes scary, sometimes
Yes.
also phenomenal conversations. I'm just going to back up and also say, he grew up in a household where he couldn't brag about the really great things that happened, because there are all a lot of insecurities that existed
Right.
inside a system. And so he just diminished his life the whole time. And I also want it to be, a place where you can play as big and shine as bright as you want to in the
Yes.
space, and people
Yes.
are cheering you on when you are. I think
Yes.
that's a really, really key part of this whole thing.
Really
So,
important. People need people. We cannot lose sight of that. And people,
yeah,
we're people we have in our lives to support us, to lift us up, and to be there when things get tough. That's going to be very, very crucial going forward. Now,
right.
it's crucial
Uh,
now.
Right now, exactly. And I think again, the more that you can bloom that, so that then it becomes more and more accessible to you as things get a little rockier. Because I will say, it's going to get rockier. It's going to get
Yes,
more disruptive. More stuff is going to fall apart. We can, start to build more. I don't know, resilience is even the right word, but preparation for that in many different ways. And I
yeah.
think that your book is a big part of helping us do that. So thank you so much, Jen, for the time and love that
Thank
you've poured
you.
into both the book and your family, and now all of our families as we navigate this together. Thank you so
All
much.
right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Wishing you so much good luck with all of it and more conversations to come.
Yes. Keep the conversation going and keep talking.